Sink into your chair. Drop your shoulders. Relax your eyelids. And breathe naturally, but notice how, with each breath, your thoughts begin to float and wander. Notice how you let go and allow yourself to drift into a light daydream. You find yourself at the base of a small hill. It's about an hour before dawn. The moon is low on the horizon, but there is still enough light that you can see a trail gently curving upward. And so you decide to walk up this trail to watch the sunrise. The night is quiet as you ascend, and it takes about 15 minutes for you to walk the first section of the trail. Here you come to a small shrine, and there is one candle. A small sign says, "When you light me, your concerns will clear away." As you light the candle, something lifts in your heart, and a soft bell rings. The sky becomes a little lighter with just the first hint of dawn. Your step is easier now, and you continue along the trail for about another 15 minutes, enjoying what you can see and just the night air. And then another shrine comes into view. Here, there are 2 candles. And the sign says, "When you light us, your heart will lift even higher." As you light the candles, your heart lifts in love, and soft bells ring. The sky changes, turning red with early morning light. You almost float for the next 15 minutes up this trail until you reach the 3rd shrine. Here there are 3 candles. And the sign says, "Light us and you will rise to the heights of heaven." As you light the candles, your heart expands and fills with hope, and soft bells ring. The sky begins to turn pink and gold. In the next quarter hour, you go up the trail with a heart filled with love and hope, and it is just so easy. You feel so light. And as you crest the hill, sunlight bursts over the horizon into the sky. You and the sun have risen together. Glorious light plays across the sky. It streams into your center. Pure joy pulses through your body and soul, and bells ring. Take a moment now as the inner you rises and dances with the sun, and in this joy, in the silence. Express gratitude for the joy of rising with the sun. And take a breath now as we return to our bodies and receive this blessing. Oh, my beloved, there is ever hope. There is ever joy. There is ever love. No matter the circumstances, you will rise. You will rise to the highest of heights because you are an eternal being made of light, love, and joy. Remember this always.
Y'all did it again. I heard it the first service and just as good, if not better, the second service. Thank you all. I had a mentor that reminded me when I was going through those dark nights of my soul, had fallen down, as we all do from time to time. He said that when you fall down, if you look up, if you can look up, you can get up. And I always remember that. And I think it's because there's something within us that is far more powerful than the circumstances that we face. It was the Apostle Paul who said in Romans 8:11 that if the Spirit that dwelleth in Christ Jesus is in you, you too will be lifted up. And as we constantly remind ourselves, we take the if off that sentence because there's no if. That same Spirit is within us. It's been here forever. And we make it the activity of our life. And when we allow it to dwell into the secret place of the Most High in our own being, we too will be lifted up. And we no longer have to prop ourselves up for anything outside of us. It's no longer necessary to do that. You know, as the old external world, as the little self falls apart, there remains something that can always pull us through where we can say that I am what thou art what I am this presence. We call it so many different names. It's like a story I'm reminded of that there was a young girl who had gone to see, I guess you could say a horror movie. At least there was a part of it that was horror to her. And she went home to sleep. And she woke up, had a nightmare. And apparently in the movie there was a character that had disfigured and scary and called Hades. And so she woke up in the middle of the night and her parents came in there. She was screaming and hollering in this nightmare. And they asked her what happened. She said, well, Hades was after me in my dream. And they said to her and assured her, there's no Hades, only God. No Hades, only God. And so she was feeling a little bit better. She was a little soothed after that. And then she took her fire truck to comfort her, to sleep with. She wasn't into teddy bears. She had fire trucks. Wanted fire trucks. So she had the fire truck there with her. She went back to sleep, and maybe a few moments later, after she fell asleep, she apparently had rolled over, and there was a button on the fire truck, and it went, woo, 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 woo. And so she started screaming again about another problem that she was having, and the parents walked in there once again, and she took the fire truck, and she handed the fire truck to her parents, and said, no fire truck, only God. No fire truck, only God. And so when she was asked, where is God? So God is right here. And that knowledge became active within her at a very early age, and she realized that the power and the presence and love of God is in her, is around her, and is her. And it's also our very life and being. And so this is what we celebrate this day. This is what we really celebrate every day. That there is a power that is magnificent. There's a power that is what they call immanent. That means within us, but also all around us. It's transcendent. It's everywhere. And with this power, we can rise above and ascend above any circumstance that we face. And so this is what Jesus Christ did, and he's an example for us. He went through his own ascension process, as they say in the spiritual work, which means he spiritualized his whole life, his whole being, and it was a process that he went through to get there. And this ascension has at least three parts. It includes the crucifixion, the resurrection, and then the ascension, where he rises above all of that. And oftentimes it starts when we are betrayed by something in life. Somehow, somewhere in our human experience, no one really gets out of this. We have some betrayal where things don't turn out the way that we expected them, the way that we planned or we think they should. Someone will let us down. Something will happen and we'll say, this should not have happened this way. Someone make their transition before their time. And I'm thinking about some of the crucifixions and experiences in my own life where, my young nephew, Christopher, who was in his 20s, had an illness and he passed away suddenly. My younger brother just passed away. And I thought about my college roommate who was just super athletic and just had so much skill and charisma, and then he suddenly just passed away. And just people I don't even know, at least not personally. You may have read about, a young rapper in, I think, Los Angeles there named Nipsey Hussle. And he gave so much back to the community through the work that he did. And we'll say in some way, shape, or form that they were too young. It's too early. They should not be going. There'll be some way in which life betrays us, at least betrays the picture that we have in our own minds as to how it should be. But oftentimes, if we're open and receptive, it'll put us on a course through which we can unfold into our own spiritual awareness. See, betrayal often precedes crucifixion. And crucifixion is that place in which the small part of us, our small being, the little self is crossed out, is crucified, and the personal self of life apart from God is eliminated. Crucifixion has a sacred meaning for us. It means, of course, crossing out that changeable part of us. It crosses out that which is not real, does not bring forth the glory of God. So everyone has to go through this at some point, but no one really escapes this. However, if you've never had this kind of experience in your life, if you've never had anything to get rid of, if you never had to let go of those crucifixions yourself, thank you for stopping by and blessing us today. We appreciate your presence. But for the rest of us, there is then the resurrection. And the resurrection story reminds us that there is something within us that can never be hurt, that can never be harmed, that can never be endangered in any way. It was here before we made this incarnation. It'll be here, as I like to say, when we shuffle off this mortal coil, because we realize that death is not the end of life, but rather the continuation of the life process. And so the Easter story is a demonstration to us that when an old way is crucified, we can be born into a new awareness. I used to think for many years when I was growing up, that Easter was about getting a new suit. There's nothing wrong with getting a new suit, a new garment. You hear? As John likes his new suits. And then earlier, if you didn't see Sergeant Major Mack, he had his Mac Daddy suit on earlier today. But it's beyond that. It's really about getting a whole new garment, taking off the old man, the old woman, stepping into a new perception of reality. So we look at Jesus the Christ as a model how to do this. So we look at that story. And as someone said, that the story is true even if it never happened. Think about that, because it's a blueprint on how we can rise up. Yeah, I think the Jesus story has no meaning for us unless we make it our possibility, unless we attain that kind of awareness. And what he attained was his realization of his oneness with God and with certainty that God was the only power that there was, and he yielded to this power. So we look at this story, look for clues on how we can access this eternal dimension, how we can spiritualize our entire life. And we ask, what was he doing? What was he thinking? What was his way of being? And the main thing that is a foundation of every major tradition is that he prayed all of the time. You look at the stories, he's often steal away from the masses. He would get away from the multitude. He would keep his communion with the Spirit high. He did this as a way of life, and he didn't wait until it was an emergency. I don't know about you. You just say, okay, this is really bad. I think I need to start turning to God now. We don't read that in the Bible. We don't read that in any of the stories, that things had gotten so bad he had to go to pray. When someone was healed, he prayed. Before dinner, he prayed. When someone was raised from the dead, he prayed. Before and after. He didn't have to say, oh my God, this is a problem. Let me call up. I need to catch one of my spiritual life center chaplains and pray right now. No, it was a way of life. And so when the seeming betrayal happened, he was ready. When I say seeming betrayal, because Judas was often maligned unjustly, because without him, we would not even know about the story. You know, we often call people a Judas. But Judas really was the one that probably loved him more than anyone else. You know, people condemn him, but this is why I think Jesus passed him the stop planted in Judas' mind that someone had to betray him in order for him to fulfill his mission in life. And we all have a mission. And I think Jesus was saying in some way, shape, or form, for this purpose I was born. You know, in the Aramaic language, it did not say, why hast thou forsaken me? There was an instructor at Unity School, Dr. Lamza, who took the Bible, and he decided he was going to translate from Aramaic into English all by himself. And he said that particular phrase said, it's for this purpose I was born, not how hast thou forsaken thee, or why hast thou forsaken me? And what this means, he was prepared for his great moment in life. As I like to say, it was almost like someone who was becoming an Olympic champion or wanted to prepare for that, and they were in training for years, and they're asked just before they go on, how do you feel? Thousands of people watching you, millions of people seeing you on television, all the little things you did along the way, waking up early, going to bed early, eating the right foods, practicing, lifting weights, all for that particular moment. And for this purpose they were born. We look at maybe a paramedic who saves a life of someone who has a heart attack, and for this purpose they were born. The great doctor who uses all of their skills to help an individual have brain surgery or heart surgery. All those moments they spent studying and practicing came down to that moment. For this purpose they were born. And this was the case of Jesus. It's our case in every moment of our life to realize that whatever we're going through, whatever we may be growing through, the situation or circumstance seems to be overwhelming to us. When we begin to know who and what we are spiritually beyond a shadow of a doubt, we begin to pray from the vantage point, we will say, for this purpose I was born. There's something within me that can deal with this. I know. And so whatever's happening, we realize that we have to move beyond where we are by forgiving ourselves for whatever situation that we're in, because part of this whole process, as we look at the story, it begins with the process of forgiveness. You know, I always say that a victim has an unforgiveness story. They tell you who did it, how many times, how long, who abused them. You know, what we have to do is get to the point, as someone said, that we get so tired of our own story that it's the same level of tiredness of the people that we're telling it to all those years. They know the story. They can tell you verse and chapter. You know, and probably in their own mind, they're saying to us in so many words, please get off the cross. Someone else could use the wood. We can use it for something else. And so consciousness of resurrection is built on forgiveness. And so we hear Jesus saying, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And, you know, on the surface, that sounds pretty good, but if we look at it a little bit more closely, we can see it from a different standards point, because, you know, the human mind will say, wait a minute, don't give me this stuff. They didn't know what they were doing. They knew exactly what they're doing when they're trying to hurt me. They knew exactly what they were doing when they were gossiping about me. They knew what they were doing. I mean, like, don't give me this stuff. They didn't know what they were doing. You know, I'm going to try to forgive them anyway because I'm supposed to do that, but don't tell me they didn't know what they were doing. But we can shed a whole different light on that story. It's really an approach to prayer, or an access to prayer. And understand that our critics, those individuals that we may call enemies from time to time, are really our best friends in disguise. They take us to a new level. They make us go so deep that we would not go there on our own. They make us pray when we don't want to go there, when we don't have the discipline, because sometimes that's all we can do when we get to that point. We can't figure it out mentally because, you know, it's just too much. We've been betrayed by life. It's too much. And at that moment, those individuals They don't know what they're doing. What they're really doing is making us become really large for God. They're helping us access dimensions and powers that we didn't know we could touch without their assistance. In fact, if they knew how good it was going to be for you, they would not do it. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. They don't know what they're doing. You know, as I like to say, they're throwing us in the spiritual briar patch. You know that story about, they kept telling, put me in the briar patch, put me in the briar patch, thinking that that's going to hurt them. And they said, that's exactly where I wanted to go. They're throwing us in the spiritual briar patch. You know, oftentimes we have to understand that the so-called enemy is not out there, it's within us. Sometimes we're unsure about ourselves. We may not like ourselves sometimes. We don't know that we're connected to this one presence. We don't have the divine spiritual self-esteem at that moment, and we may hide from our true self. And the universe has a way of always presenting it to us, sometimes through other people. And so when these things happen, we may project our shadow side on others. You know, our worries, our doubts, our fears, our unforgiveness. And these good people come into our life in order to bring it out so we can see it. And they shine that stuff right back to us. And they're telling us in so many words, here's what you've forgotten about yourself. Here's what you think about yourself. Here's where you hide from yourself. It comes in the form of criticism, dislike sometimes, if we forgive them. For they know not what they're doing, because they're really shining back to us our unresolved issues. And as we rise above them, we will move to a higher spiritual plane in our life. And so when we come to that perspective, it becomes a stairway to greater awareness of the Spirit of God. So we forgive them, for they know not what they do. But as we look at this Easter story and the whole process, knowing that the story tells us something about us, we can see a few additional things that take place when Jesus is on the cross. You know, him being on the cross has an esoteric or an inner meaning for us. It has a mystical meaning for us. We know that there were two thieves on either side of him, and they represented the past and they represented the future. One thief was constantly hanging out in the past saying, Jesus, I know I deserve this. I know that I'm supposed to be doing this or going through this punishment because I'm a bad person. He let all those negative things kind of run his life. And the other thief was saying, you know, what's going to happen after this experience? He was looking at the future. You know, he was worried about the future. And Jesus standing between the two thieves represented that midpoint between heaven and earth and the vortex of creativity where heaven is revealed on earth, representing the here and now. It represented the here and now. That's why he said, today thou shalt be with me in paradise. And he's saying to us a couple of things. He's saying, first of all, it's not our past that determines our current experience. It is our thought about the past that determines our current experience. If we break that down, you see, a thought can't be in the past. If we have any thoughts at all moving through our mind, they're right now affecting our body. They're affecting our body temple, our mental body, our emotional body, and we're releasing all kinds of chemicals through those thoughts. So we're either youthing or aging right now based upon what is going through our awareness. So we have the capability to name everything good in this moment, even if it doesn't look good right now. We name it good anyway, and we'll begin to see more of that good. You know, a lot of people hang out in the future, wonder what's going to happen. They're wondering what's going to take place, what's going to take place with their plans. And they're projecting their thought about the future, but that worried thought they have about it is taking place right now. That doubt is taking place right now. And it begins to form, becomes the experience that they're worried about. You know, I always tell you, if you want to know what's going to happen in your life, because I've seen this in my own experience, if we have any thoughts right now, if you want to have a sneak preview of what your life is going to be like, look at what you're thinking at this particular moment with your energy behind it. As I mentioned earlier, some people may not like this, but I understand. I had gone to traditional churches, you know, when I was much younger. And I used to go there, and every week they used to talk about hell a whole lot. And I was thinking nowadays, I said, well, that's where their thoughts were. I'm going to leave it right there. I'm not going to say any more about it. But Jesus said, now thou shalt be with me in paradise. Bring our attention to the present moment. This is when this presence that we call the Christ actually returns in the now moment. You know, I like to say, I said earlier that, many believe that Jesus, the man, the personality, is coming back. They used to say, and you look at the stories, he'll be back next week, next month. Or as I like to say, that when you go into Jamaica and you're waiting on the bus, and they say, when the bus coming, they say, soon come, man. Soon come. And we often accept the idea that someone is coming back to save us. But the reality is no personality coming back. We don't have to die to go to heaven. Jesus says here and now. We just have to die to our ego and get in alignment with that Christ presence that is always there. I had someone sent me an email, I think earlier this week, was giving me a very historical perspective on how Easter eggs came along today. It was scholarly, it was well written, it was serious, and it was good. But I have my own perspective on this. It's not scholarly. It's not well written. Just like there are other books that didn't make it in the Bible. And one of the times Jesus was talking about, the ego. And you know that on a piece of paper, if one little stain on the piece of paper can change the whole meaning of a sentence. And so there was a little speck on the paper, and it changed ego to egg. But hold on, there's more to the story. I've said this before. It's one of my signature stories. In these ancient manuscripts, like I said, you get that little speck, it changes everything around. So people started looking around and looking at the word ego, and they saw the word egg. And ever since that time, they've been hiding eggs around Easter. Jesus said, get rid of the eggs. So whenever Easter comes around, they color them, they camouflage them, they hide them. So when he comes back, they won't see any eggs around anymore. And somebody said, I tell you what, let's put them in a carton of disciples, a carton for 12 for the disciples. And then we'll stick them in the refrigerator. And then someone got to thinking, well, maybe he doesn't like chickens. Put bunnies on the eggs. Put bunnies on the eggs. And every time Easter comes around, they hide the eggs. They get rid of the chickens, bring out the bunnies. Of course, I just having a little fun with this at times in Easter time. Always talking about the Easter eggs. The point is, there's so much superstition, so much that we just accept. And the idea, I know I got criticized for this one time when I said, there's no one coming back. There's no one coming back. In fact, the Christ presence was that part of God within any of us, all of us, has never left. It's always been here. We just have to open up ourselves to receive it. And it returns when it becomes the activity of our awareness. And makes it greater than anything that we happen to go forth in our world. And then we look at the time that Jesus was before Pontius Pilate. And that's also very symbolic for us. When we read about the characters in the Bible, they're telling something about us, as I like to say. And Pilate represents the worldly authority, the external circumstance that seem to have so much overwhelming power over us. And Pilate thinks he has some power over Jesus himself. And he asked Jesus a whole bunch of questions. And Jesus said, hey, it does not matter. You have no power over me. The only power that there is God. And then anything else that you ask me, it does not matter. For this purpose I was born. And Pilate eventually washed his hands of this whole deal and didn't want to be bothered with this and turned him over to the authorities. But Jesus, in that moment of that circumstance and situation, was saying, the external does not control me. In our own life, we may have our own Pontius Pilates. There's somebody in our life that we may think can control and manipulate us. There's someone who may have a boss that we think controls our supply or happiness, and maybe we've allowed that to happen. People think that they're in or out of our life, and that determines whether or not we're going to be okay. And all kinds of Pontius Pilates running around thinking that they have the final word in our life. But as we devote ourselves to God and God only more than anything else, we'll say it does not matter. Do what you will. Whatever happens will simply pull the best and the highest out of me. I'm going to sacrifice my littleness in order for my bigness to come through. That's what it's all about. Because God is always there. No matter what. God is an is system. God is not a gonna be system. We don't go say to God, give me love. God is love. We don't say, God, give me peace. God is peace. We don't say, God, give me joy. God is joy. And we simply want to align with it. And when we do, we leap out of our limited structure, our egoic structure, and devote ourselves simply to that. And Easter takes place over and over and over again. And we discover that we're free agents in the Spirit. We become our real selves that's there. It's like the woman who had some Easter lilies. And, she had them for a while, and they were kind of on their last leg. So he decided to give the Easter lilies to her neighbor. And the neighbor accepted them, and they looked wilted, about to die. And besides watering them, she used to walk by the Easter lilies. And she would just say to the Easter lilies, be yourself. That's it. Just be yourself. And after a while, they started coming back to life, and they began to grow and to blossom and to bloom better than ever. And I say the universe is telling us to be ourselves, to go within and feel there's something within us that is real, something within us that is unhurtable, something within us that can never be harmed, has never been born, and never will die. It is that life force that is always there. We'll all go through some sort of crucifixion experiences. But we realize on the other side, there is the resurrection. Death and resurrection does not happen just once in a lifetime. Every time there's a shift in consciousness, shift in circumstances, it may bring a crisis to our identity. But if we welcome our personal Easters, we will be born into a better place. We'll be moved to a better place as we will begin to ascend to our spiritual self. My own experience, as I like to remind myself during Easter. I remember going through my own dark nights of the soul, and, everything in my life collapsed because of my riotous living, drugs, alcohol, whether you don't want to live another day. Don't think you can make it another day. People die. You don't know if you can get through it anymore. Close to you that don't want things you don't want to happen. And for myself, I ran into a great teacher, and he said the first thing you needed to do is to forgive yourself for what you thought you had done to yourself, because your real self can never be hurt by anything. And if you rely on that, you can begin to create something entirely new, because there's always possibilities that are available to you. But you have to remove the blockages. You have to remove the things that are blocking the realization of what Spirit has in store for you, and begin to change my whole experience from being a victim to a victor, to a vessel of the Spirit of God. As we begin to do that, we can have our own resurrections. We all can rise. No matter what the circumstance, no matter what the situation, there is something within us, as Paul said, that is more powerful than the circumstances that we face. And I can't close without saying what I usually say during Easter. That in this Easter story, this is one of those stories that didn't make it into the official Bible. This is the Bible according to Trapp. They had thought they had gotten rid of this nuisance, this individual who was a rebel, who had caused so much problems for the establishment. They finally had gotten him out of the way. And of course, 3 days later, he came back and he said, "Ta-da, I'm back." I think he said, "Ta-da, how you like me now?" And he said, "I'm free. I'm free, baby." And he's telling us, you be free. It's Easter time. It's time to rise. Peace and blessings to you. And just a reminder that next week, one of our very own, the Reverend Dave Lyman, will be giving the talk. I think it's called Falling Awake. So we look forward to Reverend Dave coming back next week. And now we have an opportunity to get in the flow of divine giving and know that it is a principle that is unalterable, that is just as powerful or certain as gravity, that, when you throw something out, the gravitational pull will bring it down. And in giving, we know that whatever we give out comes back to us in ways that we never imagined. But it also supports this community who is supporting people who are looking to have their own transformed life, to have their own breakthroughs. And as a community as a whole, that we support others who have the same compatible mission to help people become the best that they can be. And so with that awareness, let us say our offertory blessing together. Divine love, as me, blesses and multiplies all that I am, all that I have, and all that I circulate. Thank you, God. All righty then. Yes. Fan a little bit. Well, we bless the tithes and offerings, knowing we're going to bless the givers and the receivers as we go forth, have our own resurrection experience, knowing no matter what we're going through, we can rise above it. For this and so much more, we're grateful and thankful as we go forth, multiplying and radiating the all good that we are. So it is, and so we let it be. Amen. And with that, let us sing our peace song. And let us deepen that energy as we say together our prayer for protection. The light of God surrounds us. I am the light of God. The love of God enfolds us. I am the love of God. The power of God protects us. I am the power of God. The presence of God watches over us. I am the presence of God. Wherever we are, God is, I am, and all is well. Peace and blessings to you. Have a great, great week.